This is the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast, session number 237. Richard Nongard on hypnosis research you must know about.
Welcome to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast with Jason Linett, your professional resource for hypnosis training and outstanding business success. Here's your host, Jason Linett.
Break out your textbooks. It's time to relook at some hypnotic research. Hey, it's Jason Linett here, welcoming Richard Nongard back to the program once again. And I'll give you the quick backstory to this week's episode. It's that I reached out to Richard. There's a moment that happened back when we were teaching the Train the Trainer event for the ICBCH back in June 2019. And where the conversation popped up around one of the most quoted pieces of research involving hypnosis and its efficacy. And while it's good and while it's positive, the challenge was that even the person who crafted the study has popped up in recent years to say, hey guys, you are misquoting me. So it's where in this episode, we're going to talk about revisiting some of the classic research, and not even classic. You're going to see that many of these studies are actually ones that have come about in the last 10 to 15, 20 or so years. So in terms of taking that classic Berrios study that many people reference and shows the efficacy of hypnosis in 6 sessions, which even, again, the person who crafted the study is now saying otherwise in terms of a misinterpretation of the criteria. But at the same time, in this dialogue, we are going to update things. We are going to replace that with one that's much more current and has much more applicable data. So we're going to make this one easy this week, that if you simply go over to worksmarthypnosis.com/research. If you go over to worksmarthypnosis.com/research, that'll actually just redirect directly over, that's fun to say, redirect directly over to this week's podcast session. No need for an opt-in. We're just going to have a PDF download. All of the various studies are going to be listed in the show notes connected with this episode. But again, just head over there. We're going to create a link to just the rather thrown together PDF that we put together in terms of these studies, so you can see exactly where to track these things down. What I mentioned is that many of these are ones that are behind a paywall in terms of, getting access to the entire study, but you can see the sort of a synopsis, you can see the basic details of it by heading over to that website. So again, worksmarthypnosis.com/research. That'll simply point over to this week's podcast session. That's where you can see all the details and resources in the show notes, or just simply click the button and get the entire PDF download of everything. While you're there too, check out the upcoming events we've got. We've got the next Train the Trainer event that Richard and I are doing here in the Springfield, Virginia area. The details are on the website at hypnotherapyboard.com. Plus, on top of that, the upcoming HPTI Winter Hypnosis Conference. Join me, Richard, along with 35 other hypnotic professionals, sharing what's working right now in terms of helping to really create outstanding results with our clients. All the details and links over at the show notes at worksmarthypnosis.com. And with that, let's jump directly into this content-packed session. Here we go, episode number 237, Richard Nongard on hypnosis research you must know about. Hey, Richard, hypnosis works, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good podcast session. That was a great interview.
Thanks. I appreciate being on the show.
I know. I got more time, so let's do more. So the reason I wanted to have you back on the program was specifically that not only is you're kind of known in the industry as being one of the leaders in terms of evidence-based approaches to hypnosis, looking at the work that not just is research around hypnosis, but also, correct me on this, research around specific techniques that we would often employ as hypnotists, right?
Absolutely. That's really the cool thing about the research. There's over 12,000 peer-reviewed studies that show that hypnosis actually works. The cool thing is those studies all reveal the methods that they used. So we know what methods are actually the most effective methods of professional hypnosis. And I love teaching those things that are based on that which we think or we know is most likely to help more people, which is the research-based approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a moment that happened in the room when we did the Train the Trainer event back in June 2019. We did that here in Springfield, Virginia. And really what was the impulse to have you on here was there was a bit of dialogue that you shared that I went, everybody else needs to hear this. Because as much as we do have good research, sometimes there is the accident of presenting a piece of research perhaps not in the way that the original researcher had intended, right?
Yeah, one study does not make a fact. What we're looking for in research is a body of evidence, and so we're looking for multiple studies to confirm a conclusion rather than simply one. This is why you see, on Facebook, study proves that dog food causes cancer, and then the next week you'll see studies prove that people who eat dog food never get cancer, and these two things are completely contrary. How can that be? Well, studies are sometimes created more effectively than others. Sometimes studies focus on different elements of a problem. And so we have to look at a body of evidence to really decide whether or not something is effective or not.
Which, by the way, my favorite study, and I will have to link to this in the show notes, is that someone did enough meta-analysis to prove the fact that the number of people who unfortunately drown in a swimming pool every year directly correlates to the number of movies that the actor Nicolas Cage creates.
Statistics can actually tell us anything. Living here in Las Vegas, one of my favorite statistics is that in 1979, when Elvis Presley died, there were actually 34 people earning their living as professional Elvis Presley impersonators. And in 1989, just 10 years after Elvis Presley's death, there were over 5,647 people who were earning their living as Elvis Presley impersonators. And at that rate, according to the statistic, in the year 2050, 1 in 5 Americans will actually be an Elvis Presley impersonator.
Well, there's our future right there. So the sort of backstory to this conversation was that I reached out to Richard to say, I want you to compile what are perhaps like let's see how many you gave me.
I gave you 7.
You do the same thing that I do of going, here's 10 things on this, and then we come up with 12. But you really came up with 7. As I asked for, what are perhaps like the 7 most important pieces of research that the modern day hypnotist should be aware of? And we're going to put these in the show notes as something available to you. And I kind of prompted the first one here, which I'll set it up for you, which is that there's a classic study that many people put on their website. Is it pronounced Barrios? Alfred Barrios?
Alfred Barrios.
Yeah. So the study, you've probably all seen this before if you don't know the name, but it's the number of sessions versus the types of therapy versus the recovery rates. And this is that study that shows after 6 sessions, there was a 93% success rate with hypnotherapy. There was 38% success after 600 sessions of psychoanalysis, and only 72% success, well, 72 is a good number, after 22 sessions for behavior therapy. And a lot of people in our industry will put up this study because obviously it does present us in a very good light. But this was the thing you brought up, the event, the Train the Trainer thing we did back in June. What is it that we should know about this specific study to reference it?
I think this is probably one of the most important studies in the field of hypnosis. And the reason why is because it is so widely quoted. It has become a meme on the internet. I frequently see not only this information on hypnosis websites where people are trying to communicate information to potential clients, but I see it just touted and passed around in memes on the internet by people who are so proud that hypnosis is so more effective than behavioral therapy or psychoanalysis. And the reason why I think this is such an important study is because it is completely inaccurate information, which is completely and totally not useful for us, harms your credibility when it's on your website or shared as a meme, will not bring you any new clients if your clients are sophisticated or academically inclined or knowledgeable of how research is conducted. And the fact of the matter is, and this is the interesting thing, Dr. Barrios actually posted on Facebook, on Hypno Thoughts back probably about 10 years ago, and said, look, stop quoting my study. You have it out of context. And the issues here are that hypnotherapy clients are different than behavior therapy clients. The type of clients that a psychoanalysis practitioner might see are different than behavioral therapy clients. So it really wasn't apples to oranges. It wasn't that it takes 600 sessions for a psychoanalyst to help a client make change, and it takes 6 sessions for a hypnotherapist to make change, and everything else is equal. These were really apples to oranges. And here's one of the things that he actually pointed out in his post years ago. And that is, look, what hypnotists did in 1970 when I wrote the article isn't the same thing hypnotists do today.
Mm-hmm.
And psychoanalysis as a profession or as a strategy in psychotherapy is largely not even practiced anymore. So if somebody were to go see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a social worker, a professional counselor, they are not even going to be doing psychoanalysis or behavior therapy, which you can think in context of B.F. Skinner.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that also brings up the other side note to the study, which is that, I'll tell the story by way of a metaphor. There's someone who used to be in this area where I am, but they're no longer in this area. And maybe the story might be why. That they got up at a meetup event. They weren't the one hosting it, they were attending it. And their introduction was to say to this group of people, well, I'm not a therapist. I don't convince people that their problems can't be solved and, trick them into doing a lifelong session. I fix people quickly. And to this person's discredit, one, that's just a thing you shouldn't be saying because no. But two, they didn't realize there were a bunch of therapists in the room, and you can guess the level of rapport that was not established in that moment. So to look at it from, building that network that, I can look at today as an example. Here's a little bit busier of a schedule as I'm taking the next week off for some family medical things, but looking at the schedule and going, okay, this one was a direct referral from a psychologist that used to be in the building back when I was in Old Town. Here's a client who actually is a psychologist. So this way that we don't want to present that us versus them, it's one of the fastest ways to block off that referral source.
Well, and what Barrios did in his study was he was simply looking at the types of therapy, again, that were provided in that time period that aren't provided now, what the differences in the type of therapy was and what the outcomes were with different types of clients. Unfortunately, the way it's shared, and the reason why I topped my list with why we need to know about this, is exactly what you alluded to. It's a horrible way to build rapport. I never want to position myself as us against them. Hypnosis versus psychotherapy. Look, psychotherapists are largely trying to help people who are in crisis return to an adequate level of functioning. And hypnotists are largely helping people who are not diagnostic to achieve their greatest level of potential. It's an entirely different audience. We are a distinct profession. We are doing work that is completely different than psychotherapists. Now, psychotherapists might use hypnosis as a tool, and we might actually provide some counseling or advice or support to clients in transition. But the reality is we're seeing a different type of client. We're using a different type of approach, and it's not apples to oranges. And so this study really shouldn't be posted on anyone's website because it's even been disowned by the author of the study.
Yeah, outstanding. So is it something that should be referenced in a different context, or is it something that just should be, I hate to use the word.
I agree with Dr. Barrios when he posted on this, and that is that it's time and utility for being a journal article that yielded useful information has long passed.
Well, it's where I think we had the same conversation back at the Train the Trainer that, and you may be able to correct me on this better than I can. The bit of information about hypnosis was approved by the American Medical Association.
Right.
Well, we can quote that. However, that has since been rescinded, and correct me on this, that it really comes back to not that they changed their mind, it's that they purge the older records and everything before a certain date is no longer.
Yeah, exactly. So I see that time after time on websites too. In 1958 or whatever year it is, the APA, officially endorsed hypnosis.
Which right there, that is a true statement because endorsed is a past tense word.
It is, but they rescinded all of their previous, whatever they were, dispositions on these various subjects, et cetera. And the APA actually will send you a letter, I think, I've heard this, saying, hey, take that off your website. It's not an accurate representation of our position, not because they are not in favor of medical professionals or other professionals who are trained in hypnosis using hypnosis, but because the black or white thinking, this is good, this is bad, this works, this doesn't work, isn't actually very effective. And I'm going to actually share one of these journal articles later on that I think is essential because it really follows up on that point.
Well, let's keep going then. Talk to me about I'll read the sort of headline on this one. The next point was, and again, the resources on the worksmarthypnosis.com website will reference where to find these. New directions in hypnosis research, strategies for advancing the cognitive and clinical neuroscience of hypnosis. This was from 2017. Tell me more about this one.
Well, I think this study is really important. Again, one of my favorite things to look at in the research, and any hypnotist can do this, by the way. You simply go to scholar.google.com. It is the greatest web page in the world. And you can type in anything. You can type in hypnosis anxiety, hypnosis stop smoking, hypnosis weight loss, hypnosis fear, hypnosis cancer treatment, hypnosis, whatever your word is, fibromyalgia. And it'll pull up all the peer-reviewed academic studies on any of those subjects. You can literally spend days and days and days on end, and I have spent days and days and days on end looking at abstracts and looking at full journals. By the way, here's a little hint. A lot of those journal articles are hidden behind a paywall. Mm-hmm. So when you find one you want to read, just Google the title of the article and add to it .pdf, and somebody will have posted it on the web. So it's not behind a paywall.
And there's the official pro tip.
Yeah, you can almost always get access to these things. But this particular study, so I in today's information sharing, Jason, what I wanted to do is share some things that are current. Mm-hmm. What's the current research on hypnosis? And this article is only from 2 years ago. And here's what it points out. It really pointed out that hypnosis has a demonstrated efficacy for a number of different conditions. And I hear people say all the time, hypnosis is a complementary and alternative strategy to help people step into blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And it always bothers me when people describe hypnosis as an alternative or a complementary therapy. The reality is it's a first-line intervention for pain control. This article shares with us the meta-analysis that shows that it's a first-line intervention, not an alternative therapy when everything else fails for irritable bowel syndrome. It's a first-line intervention that is effective with post-traumatic stress disorder clients. By the way, when I say first-line intervention, it doesn't mean that other strategies can't be effective also, mm-hmm. but that clients clearly benefit from this as a primary approach. Hypnotherapy for depression, hypnotherapy for anxiety, hypnotherapy for smoking cessation. This particular article in their meta-analysis actually supports the efficacy of hypnosis for smoking cessation. And there are numerous studies that do. And so this is really important. The other element to this article that I think is fascinating is it really shows that there are divisions in our brains as people are responding to hypnosis, because we now have imaging capacities that we didn't have before. We now know that the brain, the mind, is literally changed when a person is experiencing hypnosis. And this study is a pretty deep study. It's a meta-analysis of numerous studies. Those are my favorites because they look at a body of research, not simply one study or another study. But the primary thing here in this that we should get out of it is hypnosis isn't an alternative and complementary therapy. It's not just woo-woo. It is a first-line intervention with proven efficacy for a wide range of different clients to help them recover faster, to help them feel better, and to help them make the changes that are important to them. And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and what's great about this one is that the main bullet points, treatments have demonstrated efficacy for a number of conditions, and research supports the role of divisions in the anterior cingulate and prefrontal cortices in hypnotic responding. So this is where I've been guilty at times of someone goes, well, I really believe in this stuff, and having to go, well, we're kind of past the point of belief. And right. Here in one specific analysis, is that combination of one, it works, and two, here's why.
It's brain science.
Right. Yeah, that's outstanding. So to have that in one specific study, that's one that I think, this one alone, for those people who are still using that, back to the first point here, that old Barrio study, this is the one I think could help to just replace it.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think anybody listening to this who's really serious about representing hypnosis accurately should find this article, print it out, know the contents of this article, and then share loudly the findings of this article with other people, because it clearly demonstrates that hypnosis is a first-line intervention.
Yeah, which again...
And that's what we were trying to communicate with the, inaccurately cited Barrios. I don't know how we'd create the second one into a meme like we did the first one, but whoever does that, is going to be a real popular hypnotist. So I'm going to put Marianne Spurgeon on that.
There you go.
She'd come up with one probably.
the queen of hypno memes. So yeah, we'll put these again, all the links and everything in the show notes at worksmarthypnosis.com. So let's move to the third one. I'll let you introduce this one.
So the title of this article is Hypnosis and Therapeutic Relationship, Relational Factors in Hypnosis and Psychotherapy. And if I remember correctly, this is actually a journal article that was a summary of a panel discussion at either ASH, the American Society of Clinical Hypnotists, or the Society of Experiential and Clinical Hypnotherapy. Again, these are the psychology and academic-oriented professional associations. And I can't remember where this panel discussion took place, but it was on the importance of the therapeutic relationship as a factor in hypnosis. In other words, what makes hypnosis work? And what was largely discussed was the research and the experience of professionals that show the most important variable in any hypnosis session is actually the quality of the relationship. So I relate this to another study that I'm not sure if I actually included it in our bibliography or not, but it's a research summary of the therapeutic relationship in psychotherapy by Michael Labert at Brigham Young University from 2001. And what he showed
gave me that reference before. If you go to rethinkingrapport.com, that's the TEDx talk that I did, right, which was all around that theme.
And what he found at Brigham Young University is that when we're talking about psychotherapy or hypnotherapy or any therapeutic approach, I mean, this probably applies to occupational therapy and art therapy and any other therapy out there. The most important variable in whether a client is going to do well or not is actually the therapeutic relationship. In other words, does the client know that we care about them? Have we communicated that we're on their side? When we believe in the client believes in themselves. And this explains why therapists who use bad methods can have outstanding results. So I'm sure you can think of somebody and you've heard them talk or share their ideas on hypnosis, and you've walked away shaking your head saying, wow, this person's not a very good hypnotist. But you go look at their Yelp reviews and you see they have, 67 5-star feedbacks. In other words, people are actually making changes and saying it was an awesome experience. There are methods of hypnosis that we either know are not largely effective. Let's take aversion therapy for one. Most professionals don't practice aversion therapy because aversion therapy is largely ineffective. There are other methods that there's simply no proof. There's no empirical evidence to suggest that this is the most effective approach in hypnosis, one of those being regress to cause. I know I've just stepped on a lot of toes. I've never been anti-regression. I just believe we should use regression as it's probably most likely to benefit clients, and that is as a relapse prevention tool, not as a tool for creating the change in the first place. But there's literally zero research in the peer-reviewed studies that show that Freud's idea of, and that's really where it comes from, regress to cause is the best approach in hypnosis. But you see at any hypnosis conference or convention, you see people saying, well, I do regress to cause. Regress to cause is my go-to technique. This is exactly what I do. And because of regress to cause, all my clients got better. The research actually doesn't support that.
Well, the research, correct me, and not to go off on a tangent, because I believe we've had this chat on the podcast already, but to look at how the models, correct me on this, are the research models looking at getting out of the model of hypnoanalysis, which is the sit back and watch the miracle unfold because now we have insight, versus the model that those who will make use of regression are actually doing nowadays in our profession? Is there up-to-date research with what Jerry Kein popularized as the informed child style of doing it?
Well, I want to address Jerry Kein's approach in particular. I actually prefer to take it back to Freud, and that's where this idea that it's our repressed subconscious. Look, we can't change the past, no matter how many times we go back.
Yeah.
We can potentially re-traumatize clients. I mean, I've never been a big fan of regress to cause, but here's the real issue: the people who say, "But wait a minute, regress to cause changed my clients' lives." The research actually shows it probably didn't. What actually changed their life was not the method you used. What changed your life is that you're actually a good person. You cared about people. If you've been practicing a method that either has no research to support it, or a method that, like aversion therapy, shows that it's not an effective method, and you've been producing results, you should actually pat yourself on the back, because it's not a testament to your technique. Mm-hmm. It's actually a testament to how awesome and caring of a person you are. And so these two studies, the original study from Michael Lambert in 2001, and then this paper published in 2019, just this year, really, I think, help us to recognize that the most important variable is my attitude and my beliefs about the client. And it really trumps technique. And I think so many people focus on what technique. Can I learn the XYZ or the 5-step technique in order to be the best hypnotist out there? If you really want to be the best hypnotist out there, actually care about people. I mean, then you can probably do the kick the chicken across the floor therapy method and probably produce results.
Richard, I've got the trademark on that. We're not talking about that yet.
Okay. I'll wait till you
Although I'd share it's and this is what the keynote that I'm doing at the upcoming winter conference is actually going to be about, the power of hypnotic framing. That let's go back and beat the dead regression horse again, but to look at it from the way that I'm framing to the client. Today isn't about where this issue may have come from. Today's about not having to live in that old story anymore. And really, from my perception, if I am going to make use of regression, that's the metaphorical shingle to hang off the hinging point of going, this is where the client's now doing direct suggestion hypnosis on themselves, which let's chunk out of that entire conversation and realize it's because I'm framing it and I'm technically selling that premise to the client in the office. As soon as they say, yeah, that makes sense, they're giving me a hypnotic contract, agreeing with me that's going to work, which goes back to the point of this study. It's about the therapeutic relationship because I've framed it, because I've created the buy-in, because we have the rapport. I could trade out the technique for something else and get the same result.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So
look, I've said if all we did was induction, deepener, and reorientation, and we did nothing else, if we were actually a good person who cared about and believed in our clients and we communicated that with empathy and rapport, 99% of our clients would think that the hypnosis session was the greatest session they've ever, the greatest thing they've ever experienced. And our goal is not to impress other hypnotists at a hypnosis convention. It's actually to help our clients make change.
You will not believe the efficacy of the kick the chicken across the room technique, though. On that note, let's move to the fourth study here, which is about functional brain activity. Introduce this one for us.
So the title of the article is by, I can't say his European name, so sorry to my European friends, Ulrich Halsband.
Yeah, of course. I think it's Ulrich, but they'll correct us.
Ulrich Halsband, right. Functional changes in brain activity after hypnosis, neurobiological mechanisms and application to patients with a specific phobia, limitations and future directions. One thing I love about this title is it points to the fact that there might be some limitations in hypnosis. Again, as hypnotists, we want to say, hey, this thing works with everybody always. The reality is that the approach of hypnosis might have some limitations. We should always bear that in mind. But here's what I loved about this study. It studied the technique of brief hypnosis. This wasn't ongoing weekly sessions. This was not 2-hour marathon sessions.
This wasn't 600 sessions?
It wasn't 600 sessions, right? It was brief hypnosis. And what we saw was that in clients, at least those related to fears, that kind of like the second study I cited here, we saw changes in the brain. So we saw positive outcomes with brief hypnosis. In other words, the one session miracle actually can occur. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that sometimes the one session miracle isn't real believable in our marketing. You and I know that if a person develops a phobia in 5 minutes, an auto crash, a snake in the road, a traumatic experience on an airplane, if they can learn a phobia in 5 minutes, they probably actually can unlearn a phobia in 5 minutes. We just need to know how to do that. But, and this study, again, supports the idea of brief hypnosis. And I think that's really powerful. People need to know that hypnosis is effective. Now, I don't usually offer single sessions. And the reason why I don't offer single sessions is, while I do believe my clients leave the first session a non-smoker, I believe that they can benefit from multiple sessions. So with my smokers, for example, I typically do 3 sessions. With my fear of flying clients, I typically do 3 sessions as well. With my anxiety clients, where it's been a chronic issue for them, or they have multiple specific phobias, I'll typically work with them for 6 sessions. Again, brief hypnosis. And the idea here, solution-focused brief therapy for those who come from a therapeutic background. Stephen Delosier at the Milwaukee Family Therapy Institute, all of his work, really has some great hypnotic techniques that, although are never labeled hypnosis, are truly useful in hypnotherapy as well. And you and I will recognize them largely as hypnotic techniques.
Yeah, which I love, even being sure to highlight the fact that as we say brief hypnosis, yes, that brief also does include 3 sessions. That brief doesn't necessarily have to be that model of coming in and just one time and we're done. That by comparison to, again, different modalities or simply the time of being inside of the issue. Yeah, here's someone I worked with recently. You mentioned IBS earlier in the second study here, that the fact was that this was a lifelong issue that they had dealt with. And from some in our community, they would hear why did it take so long? But this person was thrilled that we more or less resolved the issue in like 6 appointments. Well, by comparison, that was a brief bit of time compared to the number of years that this issue had been going on. You mentioned limitations. Can you elaborate on that here on that one?
I'm going to elaborate on limitations when I actually talk about the last study.
Okay, cool.
I think it really relates to it. The next one, I'm actually pretty excited about.
How's that for a cliffhanger, everybody? We got more stuff coming your way.
Stay tuned, and you'll discover the limitations.
I think in the meantime, we should talk childbirth.
Yeah, so one of my favorite studies from 2017, again, it's a 2-year-old study. I always try to stay current on the research and current on the studies. And you had a guest previously here on your podcast, Tracy Barrett Adams, and she, has been doing probably more hypnosis for childbirth than probably anyone I know of. But this particular journal article talks about the outcomes in one obstetrician's practice who utilized hypnosis. And so it was a well-conducted study. There were 50 participants who were receiving hypnosis, 50 that weren't. They were then broken down into control group, et cetera. And here's the quote, word for word from the abstract. Prenatal hypnosis preparation resulted in significantly less use of sedatives, analgesia, and regional anesthesia during labor, and in higher 1-minute neonatal APGAR scores. And APGAR scores are essentially a scale of 1 to 10, how healthy a baby is. And so the hypnosis practitioners, or the hypnosis practicers, again, used less sedatives, less analgesia because they controlled pain better, less anesthesia during labor, and the babies were healthier. This is really, I think, important. People say to me all the time, I'm surprised hypnosis can be used for childbirth. And again, I think we've long known that. We just haven't called it hypnosis. I remember when my oldest son was born, that was 28 years ago. And so this is probably 29 years ago that I went to the childbirthing classes at the hospital. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself as I was practicing breathing and all of those things, the reality is they were actually teaching hypnosis. They just never used the word. And we know that hypnosis can help somebody, this is the cool thing about it, start their life off better. In the last 53 years, my life has been greatly enhanced because I learned hypnosis. And I learned hypnosis when I was fairly young. I learned it in grad school when I was probably, 22 years old. I actually learned it before that. I just didn't know I was actually doing hypnosis then. And I'm really glad. I meet people all the time who don't discover hypnosis till they're 50 or 60 or even 70 years old. And they look back and say, wow, where would I be in life if I had learned this 40 or 50 or 60 years ago? And this is one of those studies that actually shows that life starts out better with hypnosis.
And what's great about this one too is to even look at, specifically the hypnobirthing program from Marie Bongen. The catchphrase of that group is that for normal, healthy mothers with normal, healthy babies, a much more comfortable experience. Which what's beautiful about that phrasing is it's not promising pain-free. I mean, Michelle used it to deliver Max. And as she put it, she goes, well, it definitely wasn't pain-free, but I was in control of the experience and it wasn't unbearable. Let's call it more analgesia more so than anesthesia. And to look at how the catchphrase, and this kind of is often presented as an anecdotal statement, but now from just a few years ago, 2017, there's the bit about higher 1-minute neonatal APGAR scores that the baby is coming out healthier. Anecdotally, from those in the hypnobirthing community, you would hear the baby comes out a little bit more peaceful. which here's research that's backing that up. So that's outstanding, which right there, there's 2 weeks ago on the podcast, Scott Sandlin was on here talking about working with hypnosis for teens. And some of it, we got into the topic of hypnosis for the much younger kids as well. Let's start them off at birth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my son, many people have watched Alex as my subject in a lot of my training videos over the years. So he's my hypno kid. And I started teaching him hypnosis when he was probably 2 or 3 to help him sleep, and been using it his whole life. And academic performance, stress and anxiety, many other areas of life. And he'll tell you that his life has been greatly improved as a result of learning hypnosis as a small kid.
Yeah, which again, for those following along, all the notes and references we're making, this is the what's the phrasing of? This is the first ever annotated episode of the podcast that you might want to be following along with, as I'll mention, I'm sure, in the intro. Let's move to this 6th study here on the list of 7, which again, I love the fact that I didn't catch this when you first sent it to me. All of these are like in the last 10 to 15 years. They're all very current, and this is
actually this one's from last year.
Perfect.
Again, all of these studies are, again, I try to always keep on top of the current research. I can pull up cool stuff from 1986, but as soon as anybody with an academic background sees a study from 1986, like the Barrio study, they say, "Wait a minute, have times changed? Have methods changed?"
This is where our common background of having the hobby previously of magic comes in, because one of my first magic books I ever bought was teaching a coin trick from T. Nelson Downs, the king of coins. And the intro to the trick was borrow a top hat from a gentleman in the audience.
Right, exactly.
So it's time to update. So how awesome. Here we are. This is a study about obesity and hypnosis only from last year.
So clients often come in and they say, and now I only work with clients who need to lose half their body weight. I only work with, specifically in weight loss, I've sort of specialized in men who need to lose half their body weight in the next 24 months, or frankly, they're going to die. So my clients are 400 pounds. I actually at one point had the fattest man in the world as a client of mine. I got him when he was down to 711 pounds. I worked early on. Some of people who know my background know this, at the William Rader Eating Disorder Treatment Program back in the very early 2000s. So this has always been an area of interest for me. And just like anyone else, the older I get, the more I have to pay attention to my own weight. I've actually lost 20 pounds, actually more than 20 pounds, since Hypnothoughts this year.
Nice.
Congrats. So yeah. So I've been actually practicing what I preach in my own life, and have seen significant results of it. But many of us work with weight loss, and clients come in and they say, they come in, we're a last resort. They come in and they say, "I can't believe I'm seeing a witch doctor, but I've tried everything else." Maybe they've even tried a gastric band type of surgery, or maybe they've been ruled out as a candidate, but that was what they were sort of banking on. And they say, "I'm not sure how you talking to me is actually going to help me lose weight." It seems unbelievable to them. And there are numerous studies that actually show hypnosis is an effective intervention for obesity, not only losing the weight, but actually keeping the weight off long term. The one I like about the Milling study here is it is, again, a meta-analysis. It looks at multiple studies, and this is a phenomenal statistic. The average participant receiving some form of hypnosis lost more weight than about 94% of control participants at the end of treatment, and about 81% more than controls at follow-up.
Nice.
In other words, hypnosis is really a first-line intervention for weight loss. And I like the word here, some form of hypnosis. There are a lot of different things. You and Sheila Granger have really pushed forward the virtual gastric band idea. Roger Moore has approaches that are really based on the science of eating. A lot of the strategies that I've used with my clients focus on the behavioral aspects and increasing activity. Other folks deal with the emotional content of a person's weight that they need to be released. And this is a cool little statement here. Those who had some form of hypnosis, whether it was recording, whether it was a live session, whether it was a group session, because it looked at a bunch of different studies, they were all successful. Mm-hmm. So people want to argue about which is the best approach. The best approach is that which works for our client.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And that's the approach that we should use. And this study of Milling gives us, I think, real confidence to passionately share with clients that hypnosis helps people lose weight and keep the weight off. And then we can go about selecting the approach that's best for the client.
And what's great about this list is, and this is something I've shared previously here, but for those that are new, I teach a lot in terms of sales, the power of metaphor, the power of storytelling, the power of explaining, here's a client's success story. And then the client conversationally goes, yeah, that's what I want to do, which describing the technique is doing the technique. And they're now pre-framing that this is what's going to be a fit for them. And I think that's a lot of what makes a lot of our strategies work. So my phrase has always been, if you don't have your own stories, don't make them up, don't lie. But this is where you lean on the success of your profession and say, well, here's the research that's been presented. It's like there's another older study that everybody was following a diet program, but the people using hypnosis as the motivational improvement factor on top of the diet program, that group had higher results. And with this one, by being the meta-analysis, we're getting even out of the program and even out of this technique versus that one, because by being a meta-analysis, hypnosis helps people lose weight. There's the research.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, in case, I don't know if it'll get edited out or not, but that was the sound of freedom flying overhead. The Air Force has been quite active today. So if that background noise was picked up and you wonder, what was that? That was the sound of freedom flying overhead from Nellis Air Force Base.
Awesome. And speaking of freedom, how's that for a transition? Yeah. So the seventh one here, the hypnosis for the management of, I love the title of this one, anticipatory nausea and vomiting. This is from 2015.
This is absolutely one of my favorite studies of all time. It's from a journal on oncology. It's titled Hypnosis for Management of Anticipatory Nausea and Vomiting. And that's because people are anticipating nausea and vomiting because they've gotten the negative hypnotic suggestion that when you have chemotherapy, you're going to have nausea and vomiting. And the study, of course, found that when people learned hypnosis, that they managed their nausea and vomiting, that they were able to tolerate treatments better, and that they were able to have encouraging results along the way and positive outcomes in the course of their chemotherapy as a result of their practice of hypnosis. This is one of my favorite studies because I think it directly relates to what you said are the limitations. So sometimes in hypnosis, there is an idea that, for example, let's say you put up on your webpage and come see me for, if you're in cancer treatment. And the idea here is that somehow I'm going to make people not have cancer because of the hypnosis. Now, I won't get into the metaphysical possibilities of how many angels dance on the head of a pin and if this is possible or not. But, there's all kinds of cases in the world of cancer treatment of spontaneous remission and misdiagnosis and all kinds of other things. So anything is possible. But what I want people to really see here is that hypnosis is a tool that can help people improve the quality of their life, even if they are getting conventional treatment. It's not hypnosis versus chemotherapy. It's hypnosis with, in this case, chemotherapy. There are obviously other approaches in the medical world to treating cancer as well, ranging from surgical to radiation to various medications to dietary changes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Hypnosis is a tool that can enhance outcomes of other treatments. And hypnosis can and should be used responsibly to do that. So when I post on my website, come see Richard if you have cancer, it doesn't mean that I'm going to cure your cancer. Now, you may find, as a result of the various treatments that you're engaged in, that you end up on the well side of your previous diagnosis. I can't quantify what role the hypnosis played in that. It was probably all of these things synergistically working together, coupled with your previous biology and all those sorts of things that are the causes of cancer. But this article really shows us that we can come alongside any other form of treatment to help people live their very best life with hypnosis. I had a client who came in for smoking cessation years ago, and it was a 2:00 appointment. She came in, she had a big smile on her face, and she said, "I am ready to quit smoking." I said, "That is awesome. What have you done to get ready?" And she said, "Well, I saw my family physician yesterday and I got Chantix." She said, "And I bought some homeopathic medicine, which we all know is comprised of nothing." And then she said, in addition to that, I bought a book on, quitting smoking, so bibliotherapy. And, I participated in a website forum where we hold each other accountability. So I have an accountability partner now. And now I'm here for my hypnosis session. And I did not say to her, oh my gosh, don't read the book. Forget about the accountability partner. Don't eat the Chantix, all these sorts of things. What I simply said to her was, that is awesome. I am really glad you're here to complete the final step. And when you leave here today, you're going to leave a non-smoker. And I know you're going to do absolutely fantastic, because what you told me is you are ready to quit smoking. And so let's get done with this.
Everything's an asset. I forget. This is the result of us hanging out so much over the years. I forget if I said this or if you said this, which was that someone someone a while ago came in and, goes, I'm so ready for today. I put on my last nicotine patch to get the rest of it out of my system. And I'm not about to sit there and tell her that, well, you're like the only person who has ever come in and a couple of thousand clients who has done that.
Right.
And I'm going to say, what's great about this? And I'm going to get kind of playful with the math on this. But it turns out if you look up online, there are studies around like nicotine replacement therapy, which, may say it's successful for like 40% of the people, which is, let's not focus on those 6 out of 10 that it might not work for, because clearly that's a product that's still out there because it works for some of the people some of the time. And the same way that you already saw on my website, here's research around hypnosis that even some of the more conservative numbers are like high 70 percentile. Well, I know the math doesn't quite work out, but basically that means today you're going into this with like more than 110% odds of success. Doesn't that sound good? And she's smiling. She's getting the humor of it, going, oh yeah, perp, which it's no. Was that you or was that me or was that somewhere else?
I think it was both of us together.
Yeah. So
I think that client I talked to, I actually added up the percentiles of the different methods and came up with 120% or whatever it was. And so maybe it is a story that I told. But I've seen so many clients over the years, and this last study really points to the fact that hypnosis can come alongside any other treatment and help improve a person's life. And ultimately, people come to our office because they want their life to be better. And I'm not in a competition to make hypnosis the only method a person uses. In fact, in some cases, that can actually harm our clients. And I certainly wouldn't contradict the medical treatment that their physician has already discussed with them, prescribed for them, and recommended. I may have them go back and share with their physician the successes that they're having as a result of hypnosis to see if the physician wants to make some changes. But one of the easiest ways to set yourself up for issues related to liability and to end any referrals is to put yourself in competition with the primary care physician of the patient who is in your office.
Yeah, which I know you have another resource specifically on even more research. You've just given us 7. And what's great about these 7 is that they're all relatively new. They're not research dating back to the 1920s when borrow a top hat from a gentleman in the audience. We'll make these available on the site. Where can people go to get your 101 medical proofs?
On my webpage at subliminalscience.com, and many people have been to that webpage, there's actually right on the homepage when it'll pop up, will say, hey, do you want the research on hypnosis? And I forget if what's on there is 24 more studies or more than that. I think it's 24 studies that I found to be really useful in communicating with clients and the public that hypnosis is a real tool to make change. And then we always give away to anyone who comes to our Train the Trainer course or any of my hypnosis certification training courses, a complete collection. It's actually a little book to put together with 101 proofs that hypnosis actually works to help people heal faster, recover stronger, and live a better life.
Which again, lean on the success of your profession and, take it out of that category of belief or disbelief that, no, here's the research that backs it up. And even this is one of the strengths that this is where we started the conversation, that by looking at the research, very often we see a description of what they did in the process. And now we've got a through line to something. Now we've got some more flexibility. And while we're all client-centered, we might not necessarily do it the exact same way every single time. To have that knowledge that here's the way that, well, you the other day posted a picture of a werewolf and was having to ask, what is this? And of course, we were all responding it was one of the Twilight movies, which makes me tell the story of years ago. Client comes into the office and she goes, if I could just, she had this fear of, she was pregnant and very nervous about bringing a baby into the world and the protection of the baby. And she goes, it's like that recent Twilight movie where they finally have the vampire baby, like you do. And here comes vampire baby. And in one of the scenes, the werewolves are about to attack because that's a thing that happens in Twilight. And the whole scenario was, of course, what do the vampires do? They put a protective shield around the baby. obviously. And she now drops this as a reference and goes, if I could do that in my mind, I'd be able to sleep at night. When, of all things, and I've told the story here before, not necessarily from research, but the value of reading script books from other practitioners. That was the nail biting patter I read from Ron Esslinger like 10 years ago. And there in that, storage facility of the brain, that thing was there. So it builds this greater flexibility. You mentioned there a moment ago, the Train the Trainer event that we've got coming up. We've got a couple of them at the time of this recording. There's one very soon in Virginia. There's one in Las Vegas. For those that
people have asked both you and me about the ICBCH Train the Trainer. And the great thing about the ICBCH Train the Trainer courses is it's an opportunity for those to put together a comprehensive training program that teaches other people professional hypnosis and does so from their base of experience and from their strengths. And the cool thing about it is that the ICBCH has a bunch of different flexible resources so people can bring those elements into their training program and create incredible training programs. And ICBCH trainers can do that online, they can do that offline, and they can do it in what we always recommend, hybrid programs. But it really is a modern approach to training others in hypnotherapy. And the cool thing is that those who are ICBCH trainers, their graduates can qualify for certification as professional hypnotists through the ICBCH. They can then access the member benefits, including our magazine titled Reframe, the magazine for professional hypnotists. The things that we've done in the ICBCH to help entrepreneurs, people in private practice, succeed at business, like solving the problem of where do I get healthcare coverage by offering a association group healthcare plan, as well as liability coverage so that they can protect their family from any potential liability or lawsuits. Fortunately, the insurance for liability coverage is cheap because hypnosis is so low risk. But the reality is it's something we have to have in the modern era. And the ICBCH provides a just wonderful benefits to members. And those who are interested in training and certifying others can take the Train the Trainer program that you and I offer usually a couple times a year, and they can certify their students, their graduates, really throughout the world as ICBCH certified professional hypnotists.
Which, correct me on this, if just simply going to, because it's your website, not mine, going to hypnotherapyboard.com. That's where the info for the next Train the Trainers are always posted.
Correct. It's actually our website. It's all of our website, the professional's website.
Look at that. So nice.
And I love to have a collaborative spirit and where we can
you
share
pay the
resources.
hosting fees.
I paid the hosting fees.
It's your website, right?
So it is right there, though, at hypnotherapyboard.com. The other cool thing that's on there, of course, is a link to our upcoming winter hypno conference.
Let me pause you there for a moment just to highlight something, which this has been the greatest strength that I found, which you'll see that I reference this over on the page for my hypnosis training courses, WorkSmartHypnosisLive.com, which was the study that, similar to this conversation you shared with me, the University of Washington meta-analysis that talks about live training versus online versus a hybrid approach. To look at doing a course nowadays, as I now do, that's not necessarily what we were doing 50, 60 years ago and teaching from out-of-date materials. Instead, having that full permission to have students in front of me and go, this is what I'm doing. So it's where this is the biggest question we've had about the Train the Trainer, is that how can you really pull that off in 2 days? Which the answer is we don't, because the 2 days is the time of giving you the knowledge in terms of these are the core competencies your students need to have. Here is the information you now have access to. Here's where we as a team begin to brainstorm how you craft your own course. But with our active Facebook group and some ongoing webinars now that we're back from Hypno Thoughts and I'm back from Australia, we're going to ramp that up once again, doing some of those video resources. But being able to present a course that reflects kind of like the research you've shared here today, where hypnosis is right now and where it's going, as opposed to here's a record of how it used to be done.
Yeah, the Train the Trainer doesn't teach people how to do hypnosis. Our assumption is the people who come to that class are already competently doing hypnosis. It's really an onboarding, though. It actually all begins when the class is over, because the ICBCH, you, me, the other board members, the many different members, the other instructors are going to provide ongoing resources to help you continue to create excellent training programs long after the initial 2-day certification course. Yeah, again, absolutely. The The end of the course is actually the beginning, because we're there with the trainers to support them, to help them create exceptional materials, and to share it passionately based on their areas of expertise and passions.
And the support. I love that someone popped up the other day to go, hey, here's my syllabus. What do you think?
Right.
So on that note, too, coming up in February at a very familiar space in the Orleans Hotel Casino in Las Vegas, the Winter Conference.
Yeah, so the 2020 Winter Hypno Conference is coming up. It is a whopping $289 right now for all 3 days. And the first day has a great keynote speaker. His name is Jason Linett. He's going to be kicking it off, and it's going to be followed by...
Do you see how a little while ago I told you what I'm actually talking about in the keynote, and we haven't had that conversation yet? The power of hypnotic framing, how to present your work in such a way. It's the theme that I've held back, which is the message in my brain for years. Hypnotic framing is a better title than the original draft, which was how to go placebo on techniques that actually work. How to take things that we already know are effective and make them even more effective by giving the framing. So rather than inspirational message and the hurrah to our profession, I'm going to be up there for that keynote, giving you real actionable content you can put into use right away.
And that's followed by, Karen Hand and Kelly
Karen
Woods.
Hand, who happens to be my favorite hypnotist, but don't tell the others.
What they're going to be doing is really interesting. They are going to actually be sharing how to create seminars and programs for the public, not for other hypnotists, as ways of creating awareness within our communities and generating referrals. And we're going to actually end the day with Tracy Barrett Adams talking about the research and the methods of hypnobirthing. So it's going to be a great first day. But then that's followed by 2 days of 35 different folks sharing ideas. And this is the one thing that the Winter Hypno Conference does that's different than anyone else. We actually record all of the sessions with high quality video. And if you register for the conference, we'll actually give you, no extra charge, all of the videos from the entire conference so that you actually never miss anything. If you pick a room to go in, you're not actually missing the content from the other room. You'll get the full high quality video recordings of it, and you'll be able to access that long after the event is over. It's at the Orleans Hotel. We have a negotiated room rate of about $56 a night, I think. So it's dirt cheap. It's on February 17th, 18th, and 19th of 2020. People can get that super early bird rate right now, and they can join all of us for what is an awesome event. This is, by the way, the conference for those who are passionate about helping other people with professional hypnosis. There's no bells and whistles. There's no stage hypnosis. There's no, funky hypnosis. There's it's
I have the
really
trademark on funky hypnosis, by the way.
Right. It's a much smaller conference because it's really designed for those who want the techniques and skills to help other people. And I didn't pick famous presenters. I picked the presenters who are actually doing the real work of working with clients and have ideas to share.
Awesome, which that's been a banner on every podcast session the last couple of weeks. But while we're here in the audio format, where should they go for that?
They can they can just go to hypnotherapyboard.com and keep it simple. Because there's a link there, although that link will lead to the HPTI webpage. That's fine. So hpti.org, but just go to hypnotherapyboard.com or subliminalscience.com, and there are links everywhere over to the actual registration.
Any recent podcast from me, and I've been putting that up there as well. Before we wrap it up here, this whole theme of taking the profession into the future and making use of some of the evidence-based strategies and making use of the research that really does support us as a first line strategy for change. Any final thoughts to share before we wrap it up here?
Nope.
So much information already covered. I love it. This is where you busted my system for the last 30 episodes. I've been going, let's give the guests the last word by what's an inspirational thing you'd like to share. And no, enough is enough already.
Read the research. Enjoy the research.
There you go.
Research and share it passionately with other people. My inspirational word of the day is research. There you go, Jason.
Jason Linett here once again, and as always, thank you so much for interacting with this program, for leaving your reviews online, and sharing this on your social media streams. Once again, head over to worksmarthypnosis.com/research to get all the resources attached to this week's episode. That's where you can also check out the upcoming Train the Trainer event with the ICBCH that's happening both in November 2019 in Springfield, Virginia, plus right after the HPTI Winter Hypnosis Convention in February 2020. All the details over the show notes at worksmarthypnosis.com/research. We'll see you there.
Thanks for listening to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast at WorkSmartHypnosis.com.
Hey there, it's Jason, and I want you to be one of the first to find out as we upload amazing new content. So do this right now. Click the subscribe button right here on this video. That's going to link you to our YouTube channel here, and you will be the first to find out as new resources and downloads are made available. Do it now.